Welcome to the Sports Dagos. Our show is called Raiders Riportare. Riportare means report in Italian. I am your host, Sonny. In studio with me, as always, is the Murph. The Murph. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm looking forward to talking some Raider football here in the Dago Dungeon, which we are, of course, wildly accustomed to. They're our favorite football team and our favorite sport, and look forward to talking about the Oakland Raiders and their progress so far in this offseason.
Murph, thesportsdagos.com, at thesportsdagos on Twitter. I just tweeted out the link to listen to us live, the phone number to call in if you want to share your opinion with the Sports Dagos and the rest of the world. Essentially, there's 6 listeners. 971-270-2007. Listen live at the links I'm putting out there, and calling in 971-270-2007. Murph, this is the first of hopefully many dedicated shows to the Raiders. We just did our Sports Dagos podcast. I took off my A's hat and I had to put on my Raider hat because much like when the seasons change in sports, we're changing what we're talking about, and it's going to be Raiders. Murph, let us first mention October 6th, 2013. Murph, what's going to happen on October 6th, 2013?
You know, much like 1996 in West Palm Beach, Florida, picture a younger the Murph back in his early 20s, so fired up to see Rage Against the Machine and the Ramones and Rancid and Metallica and all the awesome bands that were in attendance for Lollapalooza 96. Well, no, we're not talking about music here. We're talking about Raider football, and we're talking about Italian food, and we're talking about celebrating the greatness of being an Italian, of the cuisine of that heritage, and of Raider football. We're talking about Wapapalooza 13.
Murph, Wapapalooza is combining 2 of the greatest things ever invented, the Oakland Raiders organization and Italian food. It doesn't get any better than that, Murph. Raviolis, meatballs, and bread, and crushing the San Diego Dolts right before our eyes, taking place at, I don't care what they call it these days. It's the Oakland Coliseum to me, Murph. It will always be the Oakland Coliseum. Wapapalooza, October 6th. We'll be tailgating and broadcasting live, pregame and postgame. Pregame, we're going to have some special shirts to sell that I think the Raider fan base will highly enjoy, Murph. We'll probably sell them, I don't know, $10, 2 for $15, 3 for $20, something like that. They'll be cheaply and not cheaply made, quality made, cheaply to you, the audience. Italian food from La Villa's in San Jose. Murph, it's going to be a great day. We want to meet all of Raider Nation. We want to meet the Black Hole fans. You know, I'm up here in Oregon. You're out there in Tennessee. We're both from the Bay Area originally. And we love going back, man. It's like, no offense to anybody out there, if we were Islam, this is our journey to Mecca.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I'm excited for our annual Raider trip. And as you mentioned, you know, this year it's going to be back home to the Oakland Coliseum to watch them take on the San Diego Chargers. And it is the Oakland Alameda County Coliseum, despite what the other incarnations of the name have been. It will and always will be that. And just excited as heck for the game. And let me say this too. We're going to do a live pregame show. We're going to have amazing raviolis from La Villa on hand. We're going to have some wine. We're going to have some cheese. We're going to have some bread. We're going to have some beer. You better get there early because we're not buying enough for 65,000. We're buying enough for whoever's going to be there early on for the tailgate. So look forward to the show. Look forward to the game. Look forward to the trip. It's going to be an absolute fantastic time. Wapapalooza 13.
I think we may do something like, you know, if you buy a shirt, you get a free bowl of raviolis and bread. If you come up and say hello, you get a free bowl of raviolis and bread. Something like that, right? We got to be hospitable because it's in our Dago roots. Anyway, Murph, if you're listening out there, 971-270-2007 is the number. Minicamp, Murph, has just wrapped up. Coach Allen, who you know, Murph, as the days go by, I'm kind of starting to be a fan of Dennis Allen. I've been really hypercritical of him, sometimes thinking he has no idea what he's doing, but I'm starting to kind of like the guy. He's growing on me. And this week he had a press conference, and he was kind of going a la Belichick. I don't know if you want to go that far. Murph, what did you find Dennis Allen saying in his press conference this week?
Well, there was a couple of things, in his analysis at the conclusion of minicamp. There was some good things that I think was encouraging as a Raider fan at the end in that press conference. And Dennis Allen, I'm with you. Early on, I was kind of critical of him, especially last year. He lacked a lot of the punch that we're used to our Raider head coaches having, and the biggest example of that would be John Gruden, and of course his predecessor quite a few years prior to that would be John Madden. But we're used to these pretty, boisterous, animated, aggressive type coaches. And while the Raiders have been successful with coaches that didn't necessarily fall into that personality type, guys like Tom Flores still was a guy that wore his emotions on his sleeve, although they may have been more mild. You certainly never were wondering where you stood when it came with a guy like Tom Flores. So Dennis Allen and his kind of ambiguous, press conferences and personality, I think that's some of the things that we were critical of him early on. And you referenced him to Belichick. And while Belichick may be monotone when he comes to doing press conferences and maybe just saying, we got that quarterback and he's got a shoulder injury and we're hoping to get him back as soon as we can. And of course, he's talking about Tom Brady every single week. So, while he may be monotone in delivery, a lot of times in what he has to say is pretty poignant when he does, kind of come out of his shell a little bit. And so all that said, Dennis Allen this week did a couple of things that I thought were very significant. And the first thing that he did was that one of the reporters asked him, anything surprise you that you learned about the team for this month? And his response, the first sentence was, I don't know if I'm surprised. I've been pleased. And the second sentence, I've been pleased with the work these guys have put in, and obviously we're not the finished product. There's something key about that. When a reporter asks you, are you surprised? Your response always and forever should be no. Because if your response is, yeah, I was surprised, basically you're telling your owner, man, I don't know what's going on out here. This completely shocked me. That should never be part of your vocabulary. So, and hopefully, as we go forward with Dennis Allen's career, the reporters learn that if you ask a question to a head coach like Dennis Allen, hopefully what he'll turn into be and what existing coaches like Jeff Fisher and Bill Belichick are, when you ask them, were you surprised by X, Y, or Z? Their answer will be no. So hopefully Dennis Allen continues that. The other thing I thought was key in the press conference was that he was very matter of fact when it came to the receiver core and the abilities of certain positions on the field. And really, I'm going to hone in on the receiver core because one of the things that's plagued this offense and plagued the receivers for many years now has been the inability to catch the football. And while we celebrate the work ethic of a guy like Darius Hayward-Bay in years past, the end result was the same, is that he had trouble catching the football. Dennis Allen talks in this press conference. He's rooting for Denarius Moore. He wants Denarius to be the number one receiver. And when asked about what's going to differentiate him or the other wide receivers from the rest of the group, his answer was catch the football. It wasn't turn a 20-yard out route or
I love that
7-yard. Oh, isn't it great? It's the best. That's ultimately what this team needs. And I celebrate his willingness to just put that out there on the front end, catch the football.
Murph, one thing that jumped out at me in the question and answer on that link we just tweeted out. If you're not following at the Sports Degos on Twitter, we just tweeted out the question and answer session with Coach Allen. He's talking about Greg Olsen, and the question was, what has Greg Olsen brought to the offense that you can see so far? And a couple things jumped out at me. When Chip Kelly was at Oregon, this guy was notorious for staying up late at night, drawing plays on a napkin, on whatever he possibly could. And then he would go out and he would find the players, often sometimes in the hallways while they're going to and from class. And he'd say, hey, LaMichael, I got this sweet play drawn up for you. Hey, Dennis, Dixon, I got this sweet play. I want you to check it out. Chip Kelly was always thinking not about a scheme, but about a player and about how to put that player in the best position possible to win the game. Now, what's Chip Kelly going to do in the NFL? Who knows? But you cannot discredit what he did at Oregon. And I hate Oregon. They're the Paris Hilton of college football. But Chip Kelly had it and did it the right way. He didn't bring a scheme and say, hey, players, fit it. He said, what kind of players do I have? And he designed plays and an offense for those players. And so you listen to this interview with Allen, and he talks about Greg Olsen. And here's what he says. A couple of the players remarked that he's constantly stopping them in the hallways with ideas and different things they might be able to do to get this one guy going, that type of thing. Is there a difference sometimes between coaching in a way that, hey, these are our plays and this is what we run, as opposed to having an offense that's sort of an evolving thing? And then Coach Allen says, absolutely, that's what great coaching is. Great coaching is adapting a scheme to fit the players that you have, putting those players in the position to give them the best chance to have success. I think he's done a real nice job of that from an offensive standpoint. Now, why is that such a big deal, Murph? All you got to do is go back a year. When the Raiders got on offense, everyone took a Greg Dirt nap. The zone blocking scheme was the worst thing to come to the Oakland Raiders. Even worse, dare I say, Murph, than Jamarcus Russell. The zone blocking scheme took McFadden out of what he is and tried to force him to be something else. And now that Knapp is gone and Olsen's in, along with Soprano, I'm excited. It's summer. It's mini camp. It's, we're hearing tidbits. And, of course, what we hear is going to be, the nice and whatever. They have the quarterback stuff early in the week, so we're hearing some bad stuff. But I like the fact that this is the early on talk. That it's not Olsen has his way of running it, and he's coming in, and he's forcing that down their throats. He's kind of surveying the land and figuring out what he's going to do with the players he has. I love that, man. That gives me hope.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And, we know it's Tony Sperano, but we're going to call him Tony Soprano because we're the Degos, So, absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. Darren McFadden is a one-cut runner. That is where he had success in this league. And the fact that Greg Knapp took this, I'm not going to even go over it again. We all know what happened. And you're absolutely right. And when you look at the guys that are successful in the NFL, that is exactly what they do. They take the talents of the players that they have on hand currently, and they adapt their system to accommodate those players. There is no one better, here we're going to go again with Belichick, there is no one better in the current NFL than Bill Belichick at taking the guys that you have, taking their athletic ability, and putting them in the best position possible to be successful. He's done it all the way back to when he had Troy Brown, a wide receiver, playing cornerback, to having Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski take over as the biggest part of the New England Patriots passing game, having little guys like Danny Woodhead and Julian Edelman who are half running back, half slot receiver, half wide out. That's way too many halves, but you know what my point is, that's what you got to do. You got to take the guys that are athletic and get them in the best positions possible. That's where I think that we're going to continue to see that with this Raider football team. We're going to see it with Marcel Reese. We're going to see it with Terrell Pryor. We're going to see it with a lot of guys moving around, shifting around, getting your best athletes, your best playmakers on the field at one time. It is absolutely incredibly encouraging that this football team coaching staff is willing to do that, because that's really what we need. We need to be creative. What did Tony Soprano do, and what did Bill Parcells do?
I like calling him Soprano.
Yeah, I like that too. What did the Sopranos do with the Miami Dolphins a few years ago when they found themselves challenged on offense? Mm-hmm. They invented the Wildcat. I mean, now granted, it was the old single wing, and I know that offense had a history in the NFL, but it certainly didn't have a recent or a modern history. And they took it, and they took Ronnie Brown and those guys, and they adapted it for the players and the personnel that they had on hand. They took into account what the athletic ability was of a guy like Ricky Williams. They put him in the best position to be successful, and they dominated. They beat the Patriots. They beat teams. They had a great year that they turned around after winning one game the year prior. So absolutely, it's encouraging, and it's a necessity. It's something that has to happen. And I'm going to throw one more example because it just popped into my head. Ron Rivera, when they drafted Cam Newton into Carolina, they didn't say, okay, Cam, we're going to try to turn you into a pocket passer. We're going to try to have you to do something in the NFL that you never did in college. No, they introduced the read option. That's what they do, because that's what he did, and look what kind of success Cam Newton has had. He had like back-to-back 400-yard passing games in his rookie year. So absolutely, this is a great direction for the Raiders, and I can't wait to see what they're going to look like on the field this year.
It's what good coaches do. Greg Knapp was not a good coach. He was freaking crap. Now, to Dennis Allen, maybe he just hired him just to fill a hole. Maybe that's what it was. Didn't have time, didn't have money. Whatever. Fill a spot. Let's suffer through this year. We're going to tear it down, and we're going to rebuild it. In order to rebuild a house properly, burn it down, man. If there's not a good foundation, burn it all the way down to the foundation, man. Build the outside walls in, So, I like it. Murph, I just tweeted out, we get a lot of flack being Raider fans. This year, Murph, we play a lot of Madden football, host a league. I'm the Raiders, 2-time champ. We'll just throw it out there in our league. They got playmakers. Unfortunately, EA Sports doesn't think the Raiders have playmakers. And so while every other team had running backs and quarterbacks and wide receivers and linebackers as the selected guys to represent the Madden cover, the Raiders had Sebastian Janikowski and Shane Lechler. This was for Madden 13 last year. We had our special teams guys represent us for the EA cover. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, you really don't want your special teams to be the most known quality of your football team. That being said, Janikowski came out this week, and he said he wants to finish with the Raiders. One question, Murph. Willie?
No. Unless he's willing to take less money to do so. Eventually his contract's going to be up. He's going to get a monster offer from another team, and the other half of the special teams equation for the Raiders, it was Shane Lechler. He was going to get more money somewhere else than what the Oakland Raiders were willing to give up to him. Plus they had, the boomer coming up behind him and Marquette King. They were able to sign Mr. World of Warcraft himself, Chris Kluwe. There were other options for the Raiders to punt the football other than Shane Lechler. I hope, as a dyed-in-the-wool, silver and black Raider fan, want to see number 11 finish out with the Oakland Raiders. But at the end of the day, it's a business. The players know that. The coaches, the front office, everybody knows that. And unless Seabass is willing to sit back and say, you know what, I'm going to take $1 million or $2 million less to finish out my career with the Raiders, I don't see it happening because at the end of the day, these guys are trying to secure their future and there's egos in play. I don't know. I mean, do I take him at his word? Yes. I think every player that says those types of things, I think they mean it. Does he really mean he wants to finish a Raider? Sure. Does he want to see this team through the rebuilding process and see them get back to the level of success that they found early on in his first year or two with the Raiders? Of course he wants to see that thing through. But at the end of it, when he's looking at the twilight of his career and the closure, I don't know. I mean, it all just depends on what other offers are out there. So, yes, I think he would want to, and yes, I believe him. But to answer your question, unfortunately, especially if there's another option coming up behind him for the Raiders, I don't think it's going to happen.
Some guys play to get paid. Some guys play. And what do? If you can play for an organization that you've played for many years, and you can play there till, say, you're 42. What's Janikowski? Is he 35 or is he 37? I think he's 35.
35.
Do you play for the Raiders until you're 42 or 43 maybe? And that's pushing it, But he says he wants to play 7 or 8 more seasons. Or do you go play for a contender and only play for 3 or 4 more years? Do you get paid more in those 3 or 4 years? Or do you get paid more in those 6 or 7 years? Do you weigh the longevity of your career versus the chance to actually play for a title? As you get older, I think it's one of two things. It's either he's comfortable and he's happy, so he's going to stay happy. Or he wants to get that title and he's going to go get it. Or he wants to get paid and have his life set for the rest of his life and stuff, I don't think he's a liar for what he said.
No.
If he jumped ship tomorrow, I wouldn't think he's a liar. I think he's a pretty honest guy. And then the other question, too, does the trading of Leckler affect him staying here long term? Do you think if Leckler was here, he was more likely to stay? And now that Leckler's gone, do you think that's going to weigh more for him leaving?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a trade. I mean, Shane Leckler, his contract was up.
Signing.
He went and signed with the Houston Texans because he got a bigger offer from them. And the Raiders knew that with their limited cap capability and the amount of money that Shane Leckler was going to pull in free agency, they knew there wasn't a chance for them to re-sign him, and they made a decision to not to. It was not dissimilar from the way that Nnamdi Asomugha left.
Captain Correction, answer the question.
No, I am. And the answer to your question is that he's going to demand more money than what the Raiders were willing to put out. Same way with Nnamdi Asomugha leaving. The Raiders were not willing to pay Nnamdi. Right
but
or wrong.
was younger. Asomugha was younger.
Still, but the point, the mathematics are the same though. It does the value of the player equal their demand. And Al Davis decided that Nnamdi Asomugha was not worth the amount of money he was going to pay him because he could divert that money in other areas to satisfy other positions. Now, was it the right call? I don't know. Yes or no, it can be debated. But the point is, that's the decision that the organization made. The organization made that decision with Shane Leckler. Is Sebastian Janikowski going to fall into the same type of decision making? The answer to that question is yes. He's going to. Now, whether he as a man, as a player, is willing to make those concessions and say, you know what, go ahead, I'll sign for $1 million a year instead of the $2.8 million a year that the Bears are offering me or whoever else, that's what it's ultimately going to come down to. And while we like to rhapsodize, poetically about how, Charles Woodson's come back to the Oakland Raiders. Oh, that's so awesome. He's coming back to the black hole and back to where he started. And, let's celebrate all the greatness and blah, blah, blah. At the end of it, guess what, guys? He got paid more to come here. That's why he came back. The reason that Charles Woodson is an Oakland Raider was because that was the biggest offer that he got. Well, love the fact.
Murph.
Now, hold on. Dude, the fans showing up make a difference and all that. Yes, and I love the fact that he's back, and I'm not poo-pooing the fact that he signed back with the Raiders. But at the end of the day, we can't ignore the fact that he got paid more to go to the Oakland Raiders. No one else was willing to give him that type of contract. So is Sebastian Janikowski going to make that same decision? And are the Raiders going to be the team that gives him the biggest offer?
I refuse to think that way, either out of blind loyalty or just not wanting to admit it. Now, I agree it's a business. I agree that, people want to get their money. But I got to think, and I used Mike Riley at Oregon State as an example. He was the head coach of the Beavers. Beavers had 28 straight losing seasons. He came in, gave them their first winning season. He takes off to San Diego to coach the Chargers. Dennis Erickson comes in, wins with all of Riley's players. Meanwhile, Riley, stumbles and falls over there in San Diego, which, was obvious if he's playing for the coaching the Chargers. Ends up coming back to Oregon State, I think in around 04, 05, somewhere around there. Or 03 maybe. Comes back, and now his new motto, Murph, is this: if you're happy, stay happy. Mike Riley, after consecutive chances at getting to the Rose Bowl, playing the last game of the year for the Rose Bowl, he was called up, man, by USC. He was called by Wisconsin. And those are much bigger and more prolific programs than Oregon State. He could have made a ton of more money, and he chose to stay because he said, look, I grew up here. I love this place. I'm happy. I'm going to stay happy. And I got to think, woven within the sports world, there are some guys who will not take as much money and stay with the team. Janikowski, I think he's one of those guys.
You know what? That's a nice sentiment, and I don't disagree with anything that you said as far as the coaching position goes, because you can coach till you're 80 years old. But guess what? You have a limited shelf life in the NFL, and these guys want to get paid. They only have a certain amount of years to earn before they retire. And unless Sebastian Janikowski or anybody else in the NFL has any long-term plans to immediately get into coaching or any other long-term career, this is going to be the kind of money that's going to pay them and their families and support them for the rest of their lives, so they're going to get the most they can. And if you can get more in blue and red than you can in silver and black, then guess what? That's where you're going to go. So I respect your position on that, but I think it's a little bit apples to oranges when we're talking about coaches versus players.
Well, guess what, Murph? I don't like you. And I'm going to go take a commercial break to go do some push-ups and think about Janikowski. Well, that kind of sounds weird.
Oh, my God. I always wondered that about you.
I was going to say do some push-ups to work off my anger and think about Janikowski staying a Raider. Anyway, Sports Dagos, thesportsdagos.com, at thesportsdagos on Twitter. Coming right back, talking about Raiders defense and protecting the shield. Right back. All right, you're listening to the Sports Dagos, thesportsdagos.com, on Twitter at the Sports Dagos. We're talking all things Raiders. all things Raiders. Murph, the Raiders have fallen on hard times of recent. And one of the things that's plagued them for a while now is their inability to stop the run.
Yeah, for like 8 years.
Well, I want to put a note. You're Captain Sad Sack. First you say Janikowski's leaving, and then you got to put a number to it. You're killing me, Murph. You're killing me.
I'm objective.
Killing me. Yeah. Anyway, Murph. Anyway. So, the Raiders, heavy emphasis on defense in the offseason and free agency and in the draft. And you know what? It's starting to generate some noise a little bit. The Miami Herald, of all places, Murph, the Miami Herald wrote an article this week. Raiders newcomers to bolster defense. It was former Raiders defensive tackle Tommy Kelly who described the team's run defense as stop, boom, because of its penchant for being stout for 2 downs before being gashed for a long run. Speaking of Tommy Kelly, it should be a stop, penalty, if you will. You know what I'm saying? I think of Doug Martin ripping the Raiders. 251 yards. Killing them. Martin was one of 5 backs to break 100 yards against an Oakland defense that ranked 18th against the run last year and 20th in yards per carry at 4.3. Murph, the old adage is all you got to average is 3 yards per carry and you'll win every game you play. Raiders were giving up 4.3 in the bottom half of the league, giving up 4.3. Are you excited about the defense? Or do you think all this talk, all this preliminary, Sims, Walker, blah, 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 do you think it's all for naught? And do you think the Raiders are going to fall back on hard times again? Or do you think it's actually going to change? And then how much is it going to change?
Well, that's the key. And yes, do I think it's going to change? Yes. How much it's going to change? Ultimately, we don't know. And, by adding Pat Sims and Vance Walker, who both those guys have a reputation of being run stoppers in their own right, I think that's going to be a big addition for this defense. You mentioned Tommy Kelly's, penchant for penalties. And, how many times have we seen him jump off sides? And really, and that's been a thing that's plagued this entire Raider football team. So I'm not going to pin it all solely on him. But, whether it be, his jumping off sides or Richard Seymour's, personal fouls and, engaging after the play's been whistled dead and, taking those 15-yarders. There's been a lot of issues on the Raider defensive line. And what we haven't had has been solid run stoppers up front. But that said, there also may be a little addition by subtraction on this Raider football team. And the fact that no longer is Rolando McClain going to have the inability to hold his lane, to hold his gap and maintain it to help stop the run. Because as we know, a lot of times your defensive linemen are the setup men for your linebackers to come in and knock them down and finish them off. And when you don't have a linebacker with the ability to do that, then you're going to further enable the running back's ability to break through the line of scrimmage and take off for 60 yards for touchdowns, which is what Doug Martin and, a whole litany of other running backs have done to the Oakland Raiders over the, 8+ years. So I think that there's a lot of things leading this team to have a better ability to stop the run as we go forward, and I can to really draw an example of that is that this past year we had a veteran guy in Omar Gaither come in when Rolando McClain was out. And while Omar Gaither clearly doesn't have the athletic prowess of a guy like Rolando McClain, when you watch his ability to read the offense and the football's brain that was going on with a guy like Omar Gaither, he really helped the Raiders stop the bleeding when it came to the run game. And so I think that by adding in I'm not going to name them all because there's been so many linebackers brought in to this football team. all those guys brought in, along with the addition of Sims and Walker, I think is going to drastically help this team. Plus, now we got a secondary. That's the other thing too, is that now we're gonna dictate to teams more so than we've ever been able to do, again, in recent history. We're going to be able to dictate to them, okay, we got guys that can cover. Now we're going to force you into the run game. We're going to, that's a lot of what defense is dictating to an offense what they can or cannot do on the football field. And so that's something we haven't been able to do. And so I look forward to seeing what the results are in this defense going forward. Yes, the run game was a huge problem, but really there was a lot of problems going on. So if that's the biggest, most glaring issue and it's been addressed, here on the front end, then, hopefully it'll all work out. I know we as fans, those are one of the biggest things that we want to see change, and hopefully we'll see it here in the 2013-14 season.
In 2012, they gave up 4.3 yards per carry on the ground. In 2011, they gave up 5.1 yards per carry. 2010, they gave up 4.5 yards per carry. Again, the same in 2009, 4.5 yards per carry. 2008, 4.7 yards per carry. 2007, 4.8 yards per carry. 2006, 4 yards a carry. 2005, 4 yards a carry. 2004, Murph, you have to go all the way back to 2004. The last time the Raiders gave up sub 4 yards a carry on the ground, and they gave up 3.7 yards per carry.
8 years.
8 years, man. It's been a grip. It's been a while. You hope the additions of Sio Moore, of Nick
Sio
Moore.
Sio like Rio.
The additions. You hope the additions
I've got
of
the
these
correction
guys.
tonight. I'm busting your chops.
You're captain a lot of things tonight. You hope these guys are going to come in and be hungry and want to change. I mean, you can't change something if you don't try to change it. The only thing I'm wondering, Murph, these guys spend an awful lot of time on Instagram, awful lot of time on Twitter. Sio Moore can often be found in his hotel room playing DJ Hero, whatever he's doing with DJ Hayden and those guys. I don't know if you follow them on Instagram or not. They're all over it, and it's pretty fun to be a sports fan these days with all the social media avenues because you can follow these guys pretty good. It's pretty interesting. Raiders stopping the run. Gosh, Murph, I hope so. The one thing I hope as well, more than anything, is they're not going to rely on coverage to help stop the run and generate sacks. I hope they're two separate entities, but yet they always work together, obviously. If you got a good pass rush, that helps your coverage. If you have good coverage, that helps your pass rush. But if you can have a good pass rush separate of having good linebackers to stop the run and separate of having good cornerbacks to cover, oh, man, when all three of those blend, dude, lights out, man. Lights out. Who knows? I don't know what your expectations are for this season, but I think we'll move up a little bit. I don't know how much. I'd be happy if we get under 4 yards a carry. I'd be really stoked about that. Mark Davis. He's often made fun of because of his haircut. He's often talked about as yeah, Lloyd Christmas. Often, ridiculed because of his dad and stuff like that, and talk about a big shadow to come up in and stuff, I think it was Jordan at his Hall of Fame speech when he was saying, to his son, you got big shoes to fill, kind of arrogantly and stuff like that, But he did something this week that I was happy about. All the hubbub recently of the writer not the writer, but the PR guy getting fired and stuff like that. Mark Davis came out and he said something. He said, I support Reggie McKenzie. How big is that? And how much of that is just coach speak or, stuff you have to say? And how much of that is protecting the shield?
Well, it's all protecting the shield. And, there was a lot of stories that came out after the firing of Zach Gilbert and about how, this was a shot at McKenzie because Gilbert was a McKenzie guy and, how this was sending a message and blah, blah. We said it when it happened that it was silly speculation and it was, a much ado about nothing because at the end of the day, and we featured the Jim Trotter article on our website. It was a pot shot at the Raiders. And while whether it was legitimate, accurate, truthful, or not, at the end of it, the gist of the article was negative towards the atmosphere and the structure of the Oakland Raiders front office. That front office was managed and maintained for 50 years by Mark Davis's father. Now, if I'm the owner of a corporation and somebody within my organization allows an article of an expose written like that, basically, attacking my recently deceased father, guess what? You're gone. You're gone. I'm firing you. And that's what we kind of initially thought was that this was an article that ripped the Raiders, that made them look bad, that made my dad look bad. You're fired. That's why Gilbert got fired. It had nothing to do with Reggie McKenzie. So the fact that Mark Davis came out this week and said what he said, he put out his support of the current, front office of the guys like McKenzie that he hired, and that he drew the clarity there, and that's what needed to happen, and I'm glad that he did because it kind of confirmed what we had speculated that he did. But what I was really surprised about was that we were in the minority, that other Raider fans and media members, we host a little mini podcast here that has such a small, listener base and fan base compared to Sports Illustrated or Fox Sports or ESPN. The fact that those people didn't get that when you come out and you annihilate the legacy of my organization, of my family, that I'm not going to fire and terminate the person that was responsible for that, how they didn't connect those dots, that was shocking to me. That's the most surprising to me thing that's most surprising to me out of any of it. The fact that Gilbert got fired is not surprising. The fact that nobody got why he got fired and tried to draw this into some thing that had to do with McKenzie and Davis, Mark Davis, that was the silliest part of it all.
I don't think it was that silly. I mean, think about it. The Raiders, they're the laughingstock, man. I mean, let's be honest. As a Raider fan, you have to be honest. The Raiders have been and will be until the turnaround's complete. They're the laughingstock. Nobody cares about, Super Bowl every decade except, what was it, the 90s? Nobody cares about the 3 rings. Whenever you bring that up, it's like, oh, yeah, the last one was 75 years ago, Nobody cares about that stuff. Nobody cares about the legacy of Al Davis and what he did with the AFL and the NFL and the merger. Nobody cares that he revolutionized the game. They're always taking cheap pot shots. Cheap. And all that was, and that whole entire article was another bashing of Davis. It was cheap, man. It was cheap, and the guy deserved to get fired for it. Trotter, he's just writing reviews, man. He's wanting to get people reading his article and stuff, and we know it's been hit on our site huge, way more than anything we've written.
Absolutely, and I don't think we or anybody else begrudges Jim Trotter for doing his job, and that I think that's fair, and I think but Zach Gilbert getting let go, I think that anybody that questioned why he was let go early on, that's the part that's confusing me. And I'm so glad that Mark Davis, drew that clarity. And I'm looking at the article now, the recent one about Mark Davis, and he says that the next media relations director, quote, must completely understand the significance of protecting the shield, and moreover, the man who built it and lived it until the day he died. That is Mark Davis drawing the line of defense against not only the organization, but his dad, his father, his legacy, the man that created all of this, like you said. So anybody that's gonna have any kind of a negative stance towards that, you're done. You're gone. Good for Mark Davis. I think this is awesome.
I agree.
I love this story.
And the last thing on that article, on the it says finally creating a Raiders Hall of Fame. Davis says this: I absolutely will do that. As soon as we know where we're playing long term, the alumni are the most important thing about the franchise. That's my family. Trust me. Anytime I talk to someone about a stadium, it's about a stadium and a place for the Hall of Fame. A place for the Raiders Hall of Fame. So, in fact, the Stabler could get in, and he rightly deserves so. I like what I hear from Davis. You know, for once, you can say the Davis out of Oakland, I like what he's saying now. The last 10 years, you kind of cringed every time you knew Al Davis was holding a press conference. Love the guy, but you cringed. And then you wonder, what does Mark Davis think about the Raiders? You know, when you're a son of a very successful father, it's Father's Day weekend. It's probably fitting we're talking about it.
I know, right?
When you grow up, think about Mark Davis's life. Steve Sable, very similar, right? Grew up around his dad in NFL films. You're Mark Davis. Almost more than Al Davis, Mark Davis's life has completely been surrounded by the Raiders. I mean, who else besides Al could you say is more of a Raider than Mark Davis? Now, he may have a funky haircut. He may have some weird stuff about him and all that kind of stuff. But man, the dude was born in 1954, right? When were the Raiders created? 1963? Is that when it was or no?
Oh, gosh, we should know this. 67, I think?
No.
62. Oh,
was it 62?
Oh, my gosh. Shame on us. Lack of preparation.
1960. 1960.
There you go.
The Oakland Raiders were a professional team.
Here come the tweets. You guys suck. You don't know what you're talking about.
We'll edit that part out. Yeah, how many Raiders fans know exactly that date? Shut your mouth. I was 2 years off. Anyway, Mark Davis was born in 54, right? He was like 6 years old when the Raiders were created. You remember a little bit of stuff before you're 6 years old. But, 6 years old is like what? First grade? Second grade? So ever since this guy was in the first grade, he has been surrounded by the Raiders. I love it, man.
Absolutely. And again, he's been surrounded by football his entire life.
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, his dad was a coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, and prior to that, and absolutely, that's a great point, Sonny, and that's something that I hadn't thought of myself, is that no one bleeds silver and black more so than Mark Davis. I mean, that's it. He's the number one man now.
I mean, who else? Who else?
I mean, everybody
Even
else
the
has
old-time
another
players.
affiliation prior. I mean, whether it's John Madden or Kenny Stabler or Jim Otto or all the classic Raiders, George Atkinson, anybody that you can come up with, that even guys that were lifetime Raiders, guys like Dave Casper, guys that started and finished their career with the Oakland Raiders, but nobody has grown up with the Oakland Raiders. Shoot, even Al Davis didn't grow up with the Oakland Raiders.
That's what I'm saying.
Mark Davis might be.
That's what I'm saying.
Wow, that's a good point.
Now, forgive me, my numbers are off. Al Davis at 33, after the 1962 season, he became the coach of the Raiders, and he was the youngest person in professional history to hold the position. So Mark Davis was 8 years old? So 6 to 8, big deal.
All right,
so he was 8 years old.
62, and I think that's when Al Davis changed the colors and all that, because the Raiders weren't silver and black until Al Davis. That was the truest incarnation of the Oakland Raiders was in 62.
Yeah. So yeah, man. besides Al Davis, the guy who created the whole entire thing. I mean, yeah, they were created, but I mean, he built that team. He built everything about him. Mark Davis, man, he's the guy. He bleeds Raider more than any one of us. And you got to think, in his dad's legacy, I mean, think about it. As a son, unless you are some deranged, anti-sociopath or whatever, you want to make your dad proud, whether your dad's alive or whether your dad's not alive. And the thing your dad cares about, you often care about as well. And the things your dad was passionate about, you often, even if you're not passionate about it, you become passionate about it to pay respect to your dad. So, man, I can see Mark Davis really building this thing. Hired Reggie. Reggie's a stud, former Raider. You got a former Raider doing the GM work, and you got a guy bleeding the Raiders doing the owner work. I'm liking it, man. I'm liking where it's going. Anyway, Murph, we are at 53 minutes. We're currently 23 minutes over what we wanted to talk about with the Raiders. But you know what? We may have to go 45 minutes. We could go 3 hours if we wanted to and stuff.
We could go 3 hours doing a Raider podcast.
But, we like to stay married. So in an effort to stay married.
And this is only after mini camp. Golly, what's it going to be like after week one? Sheesh. We're going to be able to do a 4-hour show.
Yeah. In an effort to stay married, we're gonna cut this close, cut the show done right now. Anyway, you can check the archives of this show on the sportsdegos.com. We'll have it up there shortly. You can check us out on Spreaker. Search Spreaker for the Sports Degos. We have a regular show from 9 to 10:30 on Saturday nights at 9 o'clock, and then about 10:45 to 11:30, we'll have Raiders Riportare, a dedicated show strictly to the Raiders. Appreciate the Twitter interaction. Raider is Warrior. I'm talking about, he brings up an interesting point, Murph. Beneficial at Raiders Warrior. With all the talk of Greg Olsen formulating plays around players, why do they try to make Pryor something he's not? If Pryor's a read option guy, why not make a package for him? Why are you trying to make a quarterback, a drop back passer if he's not that, So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out and stuff, Anyway, Murph.
He's going to be a tight end. That's why.
He's not a tight end.
I'm on it, dude. I'm on the tight end thing. I'm telling you he's going to be a tight end.
You got to get your mind off the tight ends, especially the Terrell Pryor ones.
Hey-o.
Anyway, on that note. All right. Appreciate you guys joining us. Raiders Riportare every week, every Saturday night, 10:45. Check us out, thesportsdegos.com, at thesportsdegos. Wapa Palooza, October 6th, the parking lot of the Oakland Coliseum. It's going to be epic. Murph, have a good evening.
You too, Sonny. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me in the first ever Raiders Riportare. It was a lot of fun.